All right, welcome to 10 Good Minutes. This is Kale here, just trying to set up my shot. And of course, my light, which is supposedly controlled by the Wi Fi, is not working. I'm not sure if that frames my shot. But anyway, we're just going to go with it. I won't sit back too far and just kind of run through things. Today, first of all, hit the like and subscribe button. I'm trying this on here on the YouTubes. I've tried a couple of things on TikTok, if you can believe that. LOL, hilarious. But today, I wanted to talk to you about philosophy and why you need philosophy. Now, when I talk about philosophy, I'm not talking about a kind of abstract and sort of specialized, vaguely nerdy major at a college. I am not talking about philosophy in that vein, but I'm talking about philosophy in a kind of more broad and more general sense. And I'm going to make the claim that philosophy, properly understood, generously understood, philosophy is very practical. It's very important. In fact, it might be the most important thing or among the most important things. And I came across a book a couple of years ago. I did a read through with a good friend of mine. It's an encyclical written by Pope Benedict XVI back in 2007. And he said this about philosophy. And I want you to hear it closely here. So I actually wrote it down. I'm going to read it out loud. Philosophers were people who knew how to teach the essential art, the art of being authentically human, dash, the art of living and dying. So we got essential living, we've got living and dying. And it struck me then because even though I have a pretty broad background in philosophy, I'd never heard anybody sort of explicitly say that, after Socrates, I suppose, that the point of philosophy was not to win an argument. The point of philosophy was not to build out massive and complicated abstract systems which explain a variety of different um, aspects of being, epistemology and metaphysics and ethics and politics and there's all those kinds of things. We see those categories originally, at least with Aristotle, but that that it's something actually much more practical and maybe even attractive. And so I was thinking about this idea. Well, what does he mean there? So what does he mean there by the art of dying? And so then it really struck and resonated with me because I don't tend to think of an academic discipline to be so academic, which is I think part of the point that he's trying to make that it is not strictly speaking a merely an academic endeavor, but it's something much more closely aligned with, kind of the stuff you see online right now. There's lots of life hackers and Stoic philosophy channels, and a lot of this is in the kind of the they call it the brosphere, or folks, like Modern Wisdom. It's a podcast I really like by Chris Williamson, and a lot of it is just sort of figuring out life, right? And a lot of this overlaps and dovetails with some of the meaning crisis things that we talk about quite a bit. But the idea that philosophy is intended to teach the art of dying. And I just don't think we talk a lot about this notion of dying as an art. Well, what does that mean? And I think I think what it means is that in order to live a life worth living, you have to first sort of come to terms with the constant, uh, the inevitable, and as folks will say, taxes and death and taxes are the two things that are inevitable that everybody faces, and there's truth to that. And so, but what would that? How would that change? And so it occurred to me too that so much of our lives are devoted to distracting ourselves from the fact that we are going to die. You know, most of us, I think, especially those of us who are privileged enough to live in the first world, understand that. all things being equal, most of us will live, around 80 plus years on this planet. And so, when you're 20, there's not too much of a point, practically speaking, to thinking about how you're going to die in 60 years. But nonetheless, how does it change your mental calculus if you find out that instead of the 80 plus years that you are likely to live, if it were only 40? How would that change the way you go about your business? And and then you could play the same game. What if that was 25? And I think of the urgency that we all might experience if we were told that in 3 months time we would be gone, we would be dead. And like, what would you do in that span? And people talk about this from time to time. There's a joke several years back about the so-called bucket list, things you want to um, write down a list of things that you want to do before you kick the bucket. And that's fine, but it's such a it strikes me as such a kind of bougie American sort of outlook on life. I want to go to I want to go to Niagara Falls, and I want to go, I don't know, bungee jumping, and I want to go scuba diving before I die. And I get the distinct sense that this is not certainly what Benedict is talking about in terms of the art of living and dying. That would be something you would do if you were trying to actually not think about dying. That ironically, that the bucket list conversation is not taking seriously the fact that you are going to die. So if you can kind of start there and work your way backwards, how does it change your outlook on life if you not only recognize that you're going to die, but that you also recognize that you want to die well? I just don't hear a lot of chatter about this notion of dying well. I remember as a kid praying, I think it was with my grandma. We were doing family prayers one night, and my mom or my grandma or somebody talked about the idea of, praying for a good death for such and such a family member. And gosh, I do have this very distinct memory. I was maybe 10, 11, 9, I don't know. It was when I was young. Um, it was definitely before high school, so it must have been in late elementary school. But at any rate, the point is that I remember thinking that was a little strange. Well, what do you mean, Mom, that you pray for a good death? And of course, now that I'm older, I have a little bit better sense of it. I see people die all the time, friends and acquaintances and aunts and uncles. I'm blessed and fortunate to have my mom and dad still with us. But that's coming, and I will be following them, thereafter. But the idea here, I think, is a good death is one in which you're sort of at peace. There's a John Donne poem I'm thinking of right now. I think it's Valediction Forbidding Mourning, and he says there in the opening stanza, I'm not going to be able to quote it offhand. I should have prepared more, but I didn't. But he basically says, as a good man dies quietly and at peace, so too let us express our love upon this departure. That's the point of the poem. Anyway, getting back to my point, which is about the essential art of living and dying, that you want to die in such a way that you do not have regrets, but not in that bucket list sense, but that you don't have regrets in terms of you have mended your relationships with loved ones, that you have lived a life of virtue and integrity, so that at the very end, you're not kind of tallying up the score of all the things that you have done wrong, and that what wrongs have been done to you, but you're kind of beyond those petty exigencies of life that we all are prey to, right? So that if you can figure out what it will mean to die, then you can figure out what it will mean to live, right? And so, but because we refuse to answer I think the most important question, what happens when we die, as to get right with God and get right with each other and all those kinds of things. Um, Once you can get right with those end things, you can then in turn get right with, well, how do I construct my life? How do I live my life? How do I treat my friends and families and coworkers and neighbors, so that at the end of my days, whether the end of my days are in 3 months or in 3 years or 30 years or more, that I have sort of I have lived an integrated life with my most important principles. Because something about dying well means that you have aligned your life, you have ordered your life toward the highest good. And therefore, in order to answer the question of what exactly is the art of living, you must first answer the question, what is a good death? What is the art of dying? And then as I think about this question, which is sort of like cuts right to the core of so much of those concerns that I think we should have, though we do a really good job of distracting ourselves from those most essential questions. If you can answer those questions, then a lot of these things that we struggle with, the art, the various arts of living that we struggle with, are related to our unwillingness and inability to answer the biggest question, which is, how am I to die? So, anyway, 10 good minutes. Please hit the like and subscribe button, and thank you so much. Bye.